Hello, this is Megan. My topic is about the rise and fall of the asylum or mental hospital, particularly its history in America. And I definitely don't want to bore you with a repeat of my paper blurb I posted to Sakai, so I just want to leave you with the take-home message. And I'm definitely more than happy to answer any specific questions you have, or even show you my paper. We probably don't care, but I can definitely recommend some interesting books and videos if you're interested in learning more about the topic. And as I'm sure you can imagine, this topic is very hard to boil down into 10 pages, let alone 5 minutes, but I'm going to try my best. So, the take home. The rise of the asylum can be thought of as driven by one question: what is society going to do with the lunatics? Society knew something was going on with people, but they labeled them as animals, lunatics, mad, crazy, evil. And really, the asylum was sort of invented or created as a storehouse for these people, and the conditions were deplorable, but society didn't want to have these people out in the world where they could see them, so they wanted them locked away in even sometimes a small room, so they wouldn't have to deal with them. And then the fall of the asylum can be thought of as driven by the question: how can the community help people suffering from mental illness? And you'll notice sort of the shift in the tone and wording of the question, and this is really important because, asylums were thought of as they started to fall as being really overcrowded and very cold and sterile and not necessary and not really helpful for people suffering from mental illness. So now the question is about how can the community, or psychologists, physicians, social workers, occupational therapists, other medical and mental health professionals, how can they help people that, through no fault of their own, are suffering? And so that question really led to the fall of the asylum and the creation of community mental health centers, where, again, it's more of a collaborative environment. It's really about helping a person suffering from mental illness and allowing them to move freely in the world and hopefully one day reintegrate in the world. It's also important to note that how these two questions were answered over the centuries was highly dependent on the values of the time period, religious and political movements, individual mental health professionals and activists that really stood up or stood out, either way, and just the conditions of the environment. For example, in colonial America, it was a really religious time and a lot of God-fearing people, and they believed that the mentally ill were possessed by demons. So, it was about locking them up and away from public view. But then, for example, during post-World War I and post-World War II, we saw an influx of soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder. And so, also with the shift towards more applied psychology and clinical psych, people started looking at ways to cure these men and help them. And, thus came along drugs and mental health care reform and things of that nature. So really it's these questions were answered based on what was going on at the time. And lastly, the future of mental hospitals is less about a physical building, and it's more about community mental health policies and a focus on recovery and reintegration into society. And this is also called mainstreaming. And even though some of that is going on right now, or in the recent past, some of that had gone on, certain mental health acts are going to start soon and provide more funding for people suffering from mental illness. And it's really going to be more about less sort of long-term chronic stays in hospitals and about getting people help they need and then getting them back out into society where they can hopefully be productive members. It might be a little lofty, and the science isn't quite there yet, so I think the future is going to need to look at better interventions for people suffering from mental illness as they transition from the community health centers, from hospitals, and back out into society. So what does that look like? Because there's a lot of immediate readmittance. So they get the help they need, and then they're back in society but don't know what to do, and then they return. So that sort of the continuity of care needs to be much better research, and it's starting right now, and you can look at my paper and some of the studies I cited, but that's the direction. So I hope this was helpful, but again, feel free to post questions that you have for me on Sakai. Thanks.